The next film we're going to be talking about this week is the new collaboration by director Nick Love and Danny Dyer. They previously worked together on things like The Football Factory. Now, Danny Dyer plays Jack, who is a middle-aged man. He's got a wife, he's got a son, but his true passions in life are football, fighting, and sniffing cocaine. And at the start of the film, we see him get into a scrap, he gets arrested, and essentially is given 6 weeks to sort his life out, or he'll be sent to jail, and that will be the end, he thinks, of his marriage and his relationship with his son. Now, this film is being billed on tube posters and buses all across London as a rom-com with a kick, and I have to say, I don't think it qualifies as either a rom or a com. There's about 5 jokes in there, I would say, and only 3 of them did I laugh at. So it's not the funniest film in the world, but Jake, tell me, did you enjoy this? Did you laugh at the 5 jokes? Did you have a good time? And yes, did marching powder get you going?
Well, I think you'll be surprised, Reuben, because no, not at all. There is a phrase that Judi Dench once said in the great film Goldeneye, a misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the late 90s. I changed it there for this film. This film does feel like it's from a different era. An era where these sort of jokes may have been hilarious to the consumer. The sort of early Guy Ritchie era of just, geezers being geezers. But this film to me failed on from the opening, it was just incredibly offensive. And I was like, okay, if that's what it's going for, it's trying to be edgy. But I quite like the conceit of this film. I like redemptive story arcs. I was like, okay, great. Let's see how it goes. Because I'd just seen a film I really liked, and I was like, okay, I have to go see this film, which I wasn't excited for because it seemed like my cup of tea. But anyway, I'll give it a shot because I like the core idea. A man, an addict, who then tries to better himself to retain the love of his wife and his son. And that is a great film, except this film does not do anything with it. Danny Dyer's character is irredeemable. Every time he's given a chance, he throws it away. He has a great scene where as in a better scene, where he's spending time with his son and actually being a good father, but then not even relapses because he's been doing cocaine through the entire film. He just sort of does loads of cocaine, gets really drunk, and makes a fool of himself again. But this is like, the 100th time that he's had to deal with this situation, and his wife's given him the last chance every single time. And you just have to think, well, he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve any of this because the film has nothing to say about actual drug addiction. It has nothing to say about redemption, and nothing to say about that at all, I don't think, really. It tries. It sort of hits because it is a good conceit. And I think Danny Dyer is a great casting choice for that role because he has that history. It is like a sequel to The Football Factory, but now he's grown up. He needs to grow up. But this film is not grown up. Its humor is in the gutter. Definitely a, oh, go on then, cancel me type humor. It's trying to push the boundaries even more, but not funny. You say there's 5 jokes that worked. I don't really think I saw any of them. I think maybe his wife has some good jokes. I think her character is played okay, but really I don't understand her motivation. Why is she in love with this person? Why does she stay with them through all this? Why doesn't she just leave? She has better options that present themselves in the film, and she doesn't do it. Danny Dyer, even then, when you get through the entire film and you feel like there have been moments where he has tried to get better, not very succinctly done in a cinematic way at all, but then even at the end where he's like, I'm going to become a better person, and then lists off all the straw man arguments about how modern people are terrible and that you've got to be old-fashioned to be a proper man, and then just goes against everything that the film was standing for. I'm just like, well, what is the point of this? What is the point of this? What am I actually getting out of this film? Is it funny enough that this sort of Homer Simpson-esque doesn't change, doesn't learn, floating sort of morality type character works? No, it's not. Is the romance good enough that I believe it exists, that I can latch onto it and understand I actually want those two to be together? No, it does not. I want her to leave him and go off with a different person, take her son away. You don't feel good for him. Even when he does acts of good, it's not actually out of a good intention. It's almost by accident. because he has to look after his brother-in-law who has severe mental ailments and illnesses. But even then, when he looks after him, it's not done sincerely. It's not done altruistically. It's all for an ulterior motive. And, you know, that can start off the character, but then they have to develop into doing something genuinely good for themselves and not self-serving. And this character is completely self-serving, and it's not funny enough to get away with it. It's just an absolute dinosaur movie, a fossil that should have been left deep in the ground. I think it's terrible. I think Danny Dyer does a good job with the material he's given. I think, you know, there's a good bit of self-deprecating humor that's through his voiceover. But then there's just some jokes that just are absolutely old hat, that just ring really, really negative, really sour. But you seem, Reuben, to be resonating a positive opinion about this movie. And if that is true, I don't know what to say. But please, let us know. Reveal, peel back the curtain and tell us what you thought.
So the thing that you said there was he's trying to work out how to be a better man. And I think that's actually what the film is about. It's a film about masculinity, and it's a film about the ways in which, you know, the toxic cycle of masculinity leads men down very, very self-destructive paths. And I don't think that this is a film which is about a romance. I don't think this is a film which is about, you know, comedy and humour. I think that this is a film about the devastating impact that drugs and toxic masculinity can take on men's mental health. I know that that must sound crazy to you, but that's what I got out of this film. I found it devastating. I was actually really moved by this. I think Danny Dyer plays that central role phenomenally well. Because on the surface, he's this geezer, he's this hard man who, you know, just lives for these unbelievably violent conflicts with rival football teams, you know, doing all the drugs they can find, drinking all the booze they can find. But actually, underneath it all, he's in real pain. And the pain that he's in is he doesn't know how to exist in the world without that. Because the addiction isn't just to the substances, although he absolutely is addicted to substances, but he's addicted to the idea of traditional masculinity. He's addicted to that being the only way in which he feels he can have self-worth. The only way in which he can connect and bond with his friends is through the medium of getting super Larry and having a big punch-up. That's the language he has been taught as a man from the working class in the East End. That has been the way he's been socialised. And the film, I think, is about the damage and the devastating impact that those conditions have on men.
I do agree with you on that point. I do agree that that's why I was kind of like, okay, this film might not be my thing in its comedy. That's why from the very beginning I was like, but I believe in its core belief. I believe that a film should be made like this, that you should be given this opportunity, that it is about masculinity. And there are moments where we see its actual devastating effects on his other friends, sort of too far gone, that they have lost everything. And that's... But I don't think it's hammered home enough. I think that my main problem is the resolution of the film overall, because it undoes a lot of that hard work.
Let's talk about that. Let's say spoilers for the end of the film. At the end of the film, Jack basically is given a chance to restart his life. He doesn't get sent to prison, and we see him walking out of the court, and he gives a speech direct to camera. There's a lot of kind of Fleabag-esque asides in this, where he breaks the fourth wall, he directly addresses the audience, and he says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a new man. I'm going to start taking my mental health seriously, like looking at, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically lists a load of things that we would think of as being, in a word, woke, right? Things that he's going to do to reinvent himself. But all of those things are counter to the kind of role of traditional masculinity that he's been taught and that he's been displaying throughout the film. And so after listing all of these ways he's going to change his life, he says, but that can wait, because now I've got a football punch up to go to. And that's how the film concludes. Do you think that that ending is glamorizing and endorsing his point of view? Because I get the impression you do feel that.
If you're making a story, and this goes to people in life as well, if you are on a redemptive path and you have to redeem yourself in life, you cannot, when you have been given those chances, second chance, third chance, fourth chance, there's probably about 7 chances that he gets in this film. And this final one is a big one because he does defy his probation, he does defy his court-appointed therapy, and he does defy his weekly meets with his probation officer, and he just defies it. But because of a good action that he saves his brother-in-law from a situation that he put his mentally ill brother-in-law in, that he saves him from, it's like he's given a walk free. He's a get out of jail free card. And I was like, no, he's definitely going to jail. But then he goes straight back to do the thing. So it doesn't underline or validate the fact that we actually think he's going to change. Because every time he says, I'm going to change, and there's a little glimmer of hope, he always slips up in the film.
Because he's an addict. Because he's addicted to that lifestyle. Because he's addicted to that brand of masculinity. He doesn't know how to exist any other way.
I can see that in the previous moments in the film where he does have to sort of stumble so that we can get him into a firmer position for this. But the fact that at the very end of the film, he's still in the same position he was in at the very beginning, just with a slight mindset change, I have no belief that this character will actually follow through and the cycle of abuse continues. So it doesn't succeed.
I agree. What a profound and interesting point to put in a Danny Dyer football comedy rom-com.
It's a profound point, but it's not dealt with well, because I actually don't think it understands what it's saying. It doesn't present itself as horrific. The music's triumphant. The whatever song they use going into the credits, very typical geezer music.
Ironic?
I don't think it's ironic, because the humor in it isn't irony. It's just signposting alerts. We're edgy. It's edgy. And so the ending is also edgy. Right, yeah, he's going to change, but he's also going to kick some ass before he does it because he needs revenge. It goes against the complete point. The thing that should have happened was he goes and he goes to see, and we have another profound point at the end. He goes and sees this rebel. He's like, I'm going to be this person, but then takes a second and he's like, actually, no. And he walks away. And then that, to me, would have made the movie more resonant, and it would have made it work, because okay, he has several chances. I'm sure people who struggle or people who are in lives with people who struggle with addiction abuse have to sort of go through so many times. If you love a person, you will do anything to get them back on track, and they do love him. I don't know why, because he doesn't seem to love them very firmly. There are moments. I won't say that it's lost, but there are moments of dedication. I think it could have been played differently or filmed differently, or some of the dialogue changed just to make it a little more interesting. But because of that ending, it just ruins any of the hard work. And I don't even think it's that hard work that they actually put into writing this story. I think it is a great story that could have been done in a comedic way much better. But because of that ending, and because he doesn't redeem himself, and it is presented through a gaze of, he's a cool guy, we should like him.
He's so uncool. The film literally shows us. This is, I think, where we fundamentally differ. I don't think that the film endorses his lifestyle, and I was worried that it was going to. But I don't think it does, because it shows, look at everything that he's lost. He's so unhealthy. He's really out of shape. He's got all of these psychological problems, and they're all because of the fact that from his late teens, early 20s, as just a bit of fun, he started doing coke at parties when he was at university. And I think that therefore the film is saying, it's holding up a mirror to a situation that millions of people are affected by, wherein real people, good people, flawed people who do bad things because of their illness, literally are experiencing every day. And I think that therefore, that character is complicated. He is redeemable, but he's tragic. This is a really impressive performance by Danny Dyer, because it's full of pathos. You hate him and you love him, and that's exactly how his family and friends feel about him, because they recognise that the man that they love, who we do see flashes of, isn't the man that they're so furious with and so hurt by. It's because he's ill. It's because he's an addict.
No, see, I agree on that point. I don't think it glamorizes his life. I think it does do, the way it presents drugs is in a very interesting, fun and engaging way that, and there is a point that you do think that people who go through drug addiction, who talk about it after, it's like, well, they love doing drugs. It's very enjoyable. And I think that does come across. But again, my problem still falls to the conclusion of the film, because I think, yes, it doesn't glamorize. Yes, he loses a lot, but he hasn't lost anything by the end of the film, apart from, what actually is in the text of the film, that what he would lose is his son and his wife.
So he loses everything. So the end of the film is him losing everything. You just said it.
He doesn't lose everything. What does he lose? He's free from jail. He can go back to be with his wife and child. And he's put his child in some very serious positions. They get shot at.
But that act of going back, right? That moment at the end where he says, but actually, forget all that. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to, go to a big football fight and do some coke. That is literally, that's the addict being presented with everything, their whole life, everything that they could possibly want, everything, everyone that they love and all the opportunities they could ever have, and still choosing the drug over all of that because they're an addict.
No, I don't. I think that, yes, that's a better film, and that's interesting if it was presented the way, but cinematically, the way it is shot, the way it sounds, the way it is performed, is too cavalier. This is presented as a comedic ending because it's like, oh, I'll do this, but tomorrow I'll do it all next week. Don't worry, because right now I'm still going to be the funny guy you've seen who's made all these fourth wall breaking jokes. And I was like, well, it could have been even if the slightest change in the music was different, or sort of a slight change of direction for the performance could have made it that sort of irony, or it ended on a different beat. I think it is one of those films that ends in a triumphant freeze frame or something like that. It's definitely one of those types of movies where it's like halfway through or slow motion beating up of a fellow football rival because they're getting revenge.
What better expression of the self-harm that he is performing?
Now, that is good, but I think you're reading into it. I think you're going too deep in between the lines, whereas the film can be clever. I believe as I've said many times, the actual story and what it's trying to achieve, what really infuriates me, I think the jokes are outdated, definitely.
Deliberately so, I think, most of the time. You mentioned that it's offensive from the off. I think that the language that the film uses is in a bid to be authentic to how that generation speak. And I think that the film isn't endorsing that attitude.
Well, see, this is the thing, that I'm on that line of where I'm like, what does it actually want to say? Because what it is trying to say and what you're reading from it, Reuben, is interesting and is a good film idea. But because of it being through the eyes, we don't get enough. I don't think that the wife is hurt enough by the situation that is presented. Her son almost dies. Almost gets killed and doesn't know, and there's a very small bit of good acting from him when that happens, and you see him thinking, okay, now it's enough. Again, the ending is the big problem, because I think Danny Dyer gives a performance. I don't think any of the other performances are necessarily very good, but I don't think when you're watching this in the general public, you'll be thinking, oh yeah, now his life's going to be ruined or whatever, because he gives this sort of bravado situation. It's too enjoyable. It should have ended differently. Whether it ends the same but they change either the music or the dialogue or something to actually denote what you read from it, to give it a bit more of a clear edge, because I think it's too murky. I think it's trying to have its cake and eat it too. It's trying to tell a compelling story but also try and be the cool 90s-esque film, that Football Factory, have that same energy, have the same Guy Ritchie energy. But it's like, therefore, if it's authentic and it wants to tell this authentic message, it has to have a bit more resonance at the end, where it can be seen as a gut-wrenching blow, not just we have to have this deep debate to actually see whether it was actually accurate on that.
I do think that that's fair. I think that the ending is confusing. But then, sort of, as the credits rolled, to me, it sort of settled, and I felt like, okay, I see what they're going for. The thing is the film undeniably wants to have its cake and eat it. I mean, I feel I've really come to the defense of Marching Powder, and that's because I do think it's a good film, and I think that Danny Dyer is genuinely, completely tremendous. I think he makes a really, really complicated, multifaceted, pathetic, hurt, lovable, frustrating character from this screenplay.
Now, I come round to you on that. I think Danny Dyer does give an interesting performance, and I think if it was presented slightly differently in the other filmmaking, it would really sing, because you could have the same exact character, but you put it in a slightly different movie, and everything that you saw from it comes out even more. And I think you are right. It is a great performance from him, probably the best performance I've seen him do.
It is confusing at times, And I think to a certain extent the film takes a very non-judgmental approach to the lifestyle that Jack leads. You know, his consumption of drugs is presented in quite a matter-of-fact way. I don't think that the film is criticising that. And actually I think that's, to me, that makes a lot of sense. It's not saying that he's a bad person for doing drugs, because I don't think that you are a bad person for using drugs. But the film also, to a certain extent, as a result of the fact it's not demonising substance use, sometimes you think, well, is it endorsing it? And I think that applies to its representation of violence as well, which is kind of valorized and glorified. But at the same time, like the drugs, we see the devastating impact of the drugs. We see the devastating impact on violence. The fights in this are horrible. The fights in this are absolutely brutal. And I was really impressed by the filmmaking, actually. You know, they're shot in this kind of very close, sort of shaky, boots on the ground, almost documentarian approach at times, which I found it genuinely threatening and frightening. And all of that stuff, I think, feeds into the film's confused tone, perhaps, because it does very much want to have these very serious scenes where people are getting seriously injured and at times life-threateningly injured. And then it also wants to crack pretty bad dad jokes all the way through. So I don't want to say that, you know, the film is without its flaws, but to me, at its heart, it is a story about a man who wanted so much more from his life and wants to get his life back, but he is so addicted to substances and also to the lifestyle and the friendship and the bravado and the sense of self-worth that it gives him, because he is having a crisis of masculinity. And that, for me, is where everything kind of crystallizes. It is a film about being a man, and it's a film about being a working class man in many ways. You know, we haven't touched on the class elements. There's a lot about class in this, not least because cocaine, historically, you know, we've thought of it as being something that is, you know, consumed by LA bankers in the 80s, and now it's absolutely everywhere. You know, people in the service industry are doing it, people in the film industry are doing it, because, you know, they're working really punishing hours and they're earning no money. So I really like the way that the film is engaging with all of these topics. It's not necessarily doing it in a way that is particularly subtle, and it's also at times, I think, doing it in a way that is a little bit tonally confused. But I'm glad that it's doing that. I'm glad that it's having those conversations, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that I found it engaging and moving and thought-provoking. What it didn't do was make me laugh very much, and it certainly ain't a rom-com.
I think it is very interesting. I think people, I don't want to say it because I didn't like the film, but maybe do go see it to see if you have the same thoughts, because beneath it is a very interesting film. I think it has a lot to say. It is a sort of legacy sequel to the films of the 90s that sort of evoked this, you know, Romper Stomper, all this sort of football hooliganism films. It fails on certain things because it's so subtle in how it presents its severe naturalistic scenes, and yet really over the top when it presents its violence and its drug use. And therefore it's, I think, slightly out of balance. But people should go see it if you have to be over 18, because it is uses very foul language and uses extraneous drug use. But are you going to be like Reuben and marching to the cinema, or is it something not to sniff at?